This is Kristen Van Nest, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, Van Nest, not Von Nest. I guess you could say Von Nest, but Von also is VON sometimes too, right? Is that bug you at all to have the Van Von thing happen?
So in German, it's Von, and in Dutch,
Right.
it's Van. But when my family moved to the US, so Von Ness, Ness, means from Ness, which is a small town in Holland.
Yeah. Yeah.
When my family moved to America, we Americanized it to in 1647. We
Wow.
Americanized it to Van Nest. And so yeah, we were like, you know what? We're just going to do it differently. New country, new vibes. Let's just change it. And then we changed nest to nest, like a bird's
Yeah.
nest.
My buddy's got a Van last name, and they smushed the word together to one word instead of being two words too. So
Oh,
there's
nice.
all these.
It is
And,
very annoying having a two-word last name because, like, on my driver's license or credit card, sometimes they can't make it two words. And I'm like,
yeah.
what are you doing?
Yeah. 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 It's a funny thing, and the more we get automated, the less flexibility there is with how your name. You know, professionally, I'm Pete A. Turner, and that's hard to put in all formats. Or like the university I graduated from is called something else now, and so like I graduated from Cal State University Hayward. They're like, okay, we're not going to offer that, and I'm like, but that's where I graduated from. And then my degree not offered in the list of degrees in there. So, and I can't just and so, like, it's funny how computers are there to help us, but often create just as many problems.
Yeah, they're like, that is slightly different. No.
Right? Yeah, which is funny because we were working on technology stuff, and we're both trying to figure out the problem. Is it me? Is it you? Is it in between? And you just have to have patience. And so you came out and came back in, and it fixed it. But there's times where like the person will be on Safari as a browser. That it should work. Like all programs should work on Safari, but they don't. This is one of them. And so I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, what browser is she using? So we get these funny things that are little bugaboos in our day. Like we don't have to make butter. We don't have to make mattresses by hand anymore, like 150 years ago, right? But there are still so many things that are just these like little details that slow us down.
Yeah, I was reading this. He's a researcher at MIT, and he did a study of Census Bureau data, and he found that he looked at Census Bureau data in the 1940s and today, and he found that 6 out of 10 jobs that existed in the 1940s don't exist today, which I found
Yeah,
really interesting. But like some of them, like you were saying, were like being the typecaster who like puts the type into the machine to like print, or being the person who stands in the elevator and clicks the buttons for people and does everything. So
yeah,
it's when we look at like AI and stuff like that, you know, if you think about the internet was invented in the 90s, and so that made so many jobs instantly extinct. um, so I'm very curious, like AI, how that's going to change. But even from 1940 to 2024, right? That's basically one generation or one person's life. And in
sure.
that one life, 6 out of 10 jobs no longer exist. So
Yeah.
I feel like AI is scary, but it's like, it's not, it is revolutionary, but it is not revolutionary because we've already gone through such dramatic shifts that we're gonna have to do the same again, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my buddy Brad talks a lot about AI, and he's credentialed to do so. And so we talk about these things, and everything that was IT back in the old days or IS, they are now all called AI. And so we have this
Mm.
magic AI world. And here's what I know about AI is there's a lot of it that I use, and I don't see it, but my phone, after having been in my specific hands for years, cannot accurately predict the next word I'm going to write. It's never ever learned from me. And look, I'm not complaining about that. I'm glad to do my own typing. But it often guesses and it'll move the cursor. And I'm like, no, phone, calm down. Stop out thinking me
Breathe
because you're
little.
not
Yeah.
accurate. And so I don't worry too much about AI, frankly, because it is easy to beat a computer at most things. There's things like boring things that it does, like balancing my checkbook. Great, thanks for doing that. That saves me a lot of
Yeah.
time. But
I'll take that.
don't get ahead of me. Yeah, don't get ahead of me
No.
though.
Yeah, know your limits. Know your limits. It's like a night out drinking tequila. Know your limits, AI.
Your limits, AI. And yes, that dress makes you look fat. AI's like, no. Everybody, this is Kristen, and there's so many things we could talk about. I'm fascinated by so much of what you do, and anybody who's slashing, I'm a this. I love that because you don't have to be one thing, and you can sort of lift all these things up. And if one of them takes off, like for me, I'm approaching an event horizon possibly where I become too successful in other media adventures to have a podcast anymore. Like I won't be able to justify the effort and time it puts into doing my show. So my success in one area might crush this thing that I love to do and has been an invaluable asset to me. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, yeah. It's like when I moved to LA, I was acting and writing. And during COVID, I couldn't get on stage, right? Because there was no stage. And so then I was like, okay, well, I've had this crazy experience and I've had this crazy life. Maybe I should write a book about it. And so, luckily that turned into a 2-book deal with a publisher. And so now I'm not on stage. Do I miss it? Yes. But something else took off that I'm completely grateful for. So sometimes life takes you in different directions that you don't
It sure
expect.
does. Yeah. And we're talking, we're having you two talking to us because we're talking about your book, Where to Nest. And so I thought we might get into that in a minute, but I want to stick with this slashing thing first because there is the ability to okay, so I'm working on, have not got confirmation yet, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, 50-50, maybe 40-60 that I'll get Kate Hudson on the show because she's going to drop an album in like 2 Fridays. And so when you drop an album, you do media tours. And I've had a lot of very successful musicians on the show and a lot of very successful actors. So it's very possible that that could happen if they're of a mind to do a lot of media. Maybe she's just doing it inside. But Kate Hudson is dropping an album and she's playing the show live right by where we live, and anybody can
Oh,
go see it for like $40. I'd go do that. Let's go.
yeah. Wait, where is it? Let's meet up. I'm in.
I'll have to tell you what the theater. I'll look in flight here while we're talking and tell you what theater it's at because I'd love to promote what she's doing. But I've seen Billy Bob Thornton and his band at the Troubadour, and you get to do these things because we don't have to do just one thing. Now, sure, Billy Bob's got enough money to be in a bad band. His band's actually good, but he can do whatever he wants. It can be a hobby, but it is neat that in the modern world, because you don't just typeset for 60 hours and go home exhausted and smoke and drink and be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? We can do these things that do enliven us and kind of sense where the spirit moves us and get the reward of that kind of life.
Yeah, that totally resonates. I was in Kazakhstan in their old capital, Almaty, and it was a rainy day. I went up to the top of this mountain, where they had a little zoo. There was a little raccoon there where I was like, where did you get this raccoon? Like, there are no raccoons in Kazakhstan. Like, this little guy's come from my home, apparently. But the other funny thing that I saw there was a picture of Steven Seagal. Now, Steven Seagal has traveled all over the world. He has been on a New Orleans cop show. He has his own album, which I highly recommend people listen to. It is quite entertaining. And he was an amazing actor. And he did acupuncture at one point in his life, I believe. So he's one of those people, like, it's kind of fun when you travel. Him and I'd say Benjamin Franklin, when I was in Europe, I'd be going down like some random hallway in a church or an old building, and then I'd look and there'd be like a little stained glass thing, and then Benjamin Franklin's face would be there. And I feel like there are certain people where they believe they truly lived what you're saying of like, I am
Yeah.
not one thing, I am whatever I want to be. And throughout my travels, it's been kind of fun seeing those people who really truly believe that pop up in the
Right.
most random of places.
Yeah, it's an amazing time where we can do that. I will say on the other side of that is it is a wiggly tightrope we have to walk on because it is not the comfortable thing of knowing that every other Friday you're going to get a paycheck from the same company that you can work at it for as long as you want, and maybe they even throw you a party when you retire. Like that is not for me a comfortable life, and I imagine the same is for you. So we have to learn how to find the value in what we do. And a lot of that, of course, is me. Listen, just speaking for me with my show. to find all kinds of value that I never would have realized if I was focusing on monetize, 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 because I don't want to sit here and talk about buy a mattress or whatever it is. Nothing wrong with doing that. But for me, I don't find that as valuable as having these kind of conversations, meeting you at the Kate Hudson show, and all these other things that can happen that can explode your world of fulfillment.
Yeah, yeah, and as someone who's changed careers constantly, partially because I'm geographically moving all the time, I find that it can be a hard balance when you look at the monetary component because the thing that you're more experienced in, the older thing that you might want to be transitioning away from, you have more expertise in. So people are willing to pay more for it. So if you always look at, oh, well, I'm making more at the thing I'm currently doing, but I really like doing this other thing. Oh, but I'm not making any money at it. If you don't build the new skill, you don't have the new expertise, and then you never get to the point where people want to pay for it. So it's
Yeah.
like a hard trade-off because as you career transition, if you only look at the monetary benefit versus like the value add to your life, it doesn't make sense to transition. But if you
Mm.
look at what makes you happy and what makes you fulfilled and what is the next skill, right? Like
Yeah.
then it makes sense. So there's always that like weird trade-off that you kind of have to make.
Yeah. I want to come right back to this, but I also don't want to lose the fact that, hey, everybody, look at that link below. Kate Hudson at the
Yes.
Bellwether next 2 Fridays from now, the 18th. Or, yeah, Saturdays, 2 Saturdays from now. Sorry. At the 18th. And I think it's like $50 to go see the show with her new album dropping the day before. So there it
Oh,
is, the
so
Bellwether.
cool.
And we can try to figure it out. I might
Yeah.
also be going to the Magic Castle because I got a friend in from out of town. And so I'm trying to like wow him with some LA stuff, you know.
Oh, I've never been to the Magic Castle, but I've
Oh,
heard
we're gonna
it's
go then. I'm gonna get
phenomenal.
us invited to go. Maybe you can even join us. I'll ask
I'm in.
Walter
Yeah.
and hang out. Okay. I'm not even joking. I'll set that up. But let's
Yeah.
get back to the tightrope and trying to balance things out. So one of the things that I do with the podcast is I try to give back to the community. And everybody is trying to figure out like, can I do this thing? Right. And what I try to put the dragons up, like, look at this dragon. It's scary. You're never gonna defeat it. You have to figure out how to do it. If you're not willing to beat this dragon, don't look ahead to monetizing because and one of those dragons is simple. It's can you stand to hear your own voice? Will you sit down and listen to yourself host something so you can get better at it? Because if you aren't, then you're not going to get better at the same rate as your peers. And then there's professional people and they're going to destroy you. So I try to show people these dragons, but I also try to give them the view that you don't have to figure this out right away. Just see if you can make 10 shows come up and get produced and go out, and then see if you can do another 10 and another 10. And all of a sudden, you start to develop a voice. And don't worry about where your show goes right away because you don't even know. I liken it to swimming. If you came to me and said, Pete, I'd love to go do some lap swimming with you. And I would say, hey, great. Yeah, let's do it. Can you swim across the pool 70 times? You're like, oh, heavens no. And I'm not saying that you can't, but 70
I
times.
can't.
But
Definitely not.
yeah. And so how do you learn how to swim? Well, you go out with a friend and you work on your skills. Maybe you take some lessons outside of that and you work at it because it's not easy to do. And running a show, writing a book, creating pithy blogs or writing a one-woman, all these things take discipline and time. And you can see the reward and talk about monetization. But if you can't sit down and do the work as the artist, as the swimmer, as the martial artist, whatever it's going to be, you don't get to have the big things. What I tell them is don't worry so much about the outcomes because you're going to end up somewhere you can't even imagine if you can get to 50 or 100, 200 shows, which seems impossible today. But if you iterate and keep going, I'd say you get there.
Yeah, that resonates with me with writing the book because people always ask me, how do you write a book? And I'm like, I have the most boring advice ever. You write every day. And that's so boring and annoying to tell
Yeah.
everyone, but that's the truth. In the back of in my acknowledgments, I thank my accountability group because I wouldn't have written the book if I didn't sit down and write for 2 hours every day. And for writing Where to Nest, when I look back at some of the older chapters, they're made up of essays that I wrote at other points in my life. And maybe the essays were rejected by publications then, or I didn't really finish them and I moved on to something else. But coming back,
Mm.
in the present to write the book and seeing those old essays, I'm like, wow, I have become a better writer since then. And that is because of the writing every day. So
Yeah.
I think that's such an important point, that it really comes down to commitment. If you really want something and it's building a skill, and skill takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And also understanding what's out there, like to build the skill, but just because you write a book doesn't mean anybody buys it. Like
Yeah.
you have to, like, one of the reasons why I haven't written a book because I'm busy enough that I'm not going to do the pro bono work in hopes that someone buys my book enough to make it worthwhile. Because the chances are that's not going to happen. I've got all kinds of great stories. I'll tell them here, and maybe I'll get to a book at some point. But I'm not willing to sit down and do that discipline every day. I'll do other things, and so I try to create. And I've got things I'm always working on writing wise, but I don't know what my writing path is going to be. I really don't. I write, but is it going anywhere? I don't know. But I really don't care because I enjoy the craft of it. And so if it lights on to something, and if I make an impact, and you know how this works, someone will say, "Hey, you wrote this and it really unlocked something for me and I appreciate it." Or you mentioned my dad who passed away and I had no idea about this story. Thank you so much. All these things. And my show is like that too. I get all the time. People will say, "Hey, I heard this." This is years after I made the show. And they'll be like, "I can't believe, thank you so much for this. I never," and actually a great example of that is my friend Scott passed away about 10 days ago. I'm going to his service
Oh,
tomorrow.
I'm sorry.
He's about my age. He's in his mid-50s. And yeah, we had done a show with him because he had a really cool life. And so I'm so glad that we got that. And now everybody who wants to know more about Scott and what he did, there's still a little bit of Scott left in the ether that we can use and learn more about him.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. When you write, when you sit down, like I'm going to write 2 hours today, whatever it is, right? Do you know where you're headed?
So I find that if I don't have a really good outline, it in the end wastes my time. Like it takes a lot
Mm,
longer to revise. So when I'm writing, I really focus on first sitting down and making sure I like the outline. Now, when I actually write it, oftentimes a lot of that will change, but at least it gives me a structure. I think of
yeah.
like two pieces of storytelling. I think of it as the bones and the meat. And the bones are the structure. Like, what is the story arc? Where are we going? What is the point of the story? And then the meat is how you tell the story. So for me, since I do comedy, like I have my very unique voice of how I communicate things. I'm sure someone else, I find actually the structure component or writing the outline extremely boring. It doesn't feel unique, but a good story arc isn't unique, right? Like storytelling is a very consistent structure. It's what you put on the structure that actually is your own unique voice. So when I write outlines, I'm like, is this even good? I'm so bored. But then when I
Yeah.
actually like create the dialogue and create the scenarios and the world, that's when things really get interesting.
Yeah. It is. It is, especially when okay. So I used to be a spy, and one of the things you learn when you're my kind of spy is that perspectives matter. So if I'm looking through my own eyes and trying to solve the problem and do my job, not nearly as effective as if I have all of the specs, circumspect, retrospect, introspect, all of the perspectives, and I account for not all of them, but I'm always like toggling between them. What camera should I be looking through? And I'll get a greater understanding of the person I'm talking to by taking my view out of it, really completely remove my ego and just ask the basic questions. And then the person, if you connect with them, if they sense at all that you're talking to them to understand, boy, they will help you understand. They will open up and they'll say things. It's not 100% of the time, and it's not an easy. I'm describing a very complex process, but if you get that person to do that, boy, you can find a lot of things out. And so there's a lot of value in that perspective and multiplying what direction you're looking at something from.
Yeah, totally. I feel like listening is such a more powerful skill than
Oh boy.
speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in my stories, really listening, sometimes people say very unique things where I'm like, how does this person believe that? That
Yeah.
perspective is interesting to me. And I feel like those are the funny moments in my stories, and those are the ones that stick with me in my memory because I'm like, wow, that's so unique. Um, so I feel like listening it just is just like such an important skill because that's how you hear someone's character and it's also
Sure.
how you learn about someone.
You're so young for the level of experiences you've had. You've been unafraid to go abroad. You've Fulbright Scholarship. I mean, we can just go on and on, all the things that you've done. Always fascinated by the Singularity University. I think that's an amazing place to be associated to do anything. Did you know when you graduated from high school you were going to be on this journey? Is this at all mapped, or is this all choose your adventure? Go to this page, go to that page, kind of thing.
It was very choose your adventure. As a kid, I traveled first when I was 16. My grandmother was like, if you raise half the money, I'll pay for you to go to Paris for a month. So I did my catering job for $10 an hour and
Yeah.
worked every single weekend and luckily could afford to go abroad. So that's kind of where my love of travel started. But when I graduated college, I was like, oh, I want to do international business because then I can travel abroad and someone can pay me. And I was like, the only way to travel abroad is to have a company pay me. Like that's what everyone tells you. I didn't fathom other things. And then I had a full-time job working in New York City for a branding consulting firm. And I was absolutely miserable. Like I would have to fly to Minneapolis on like a whim. And I didn't really feel like I had freedom, which is one of my values
Mm,
as a person.
right. Right.
It sounds like you have a similar value around that. So I applied for the Fulbright and was so grateful and lucky that I got that. My computer's about to die. Let me just plug it in 1 second.
Okay, you plug it in. While you plug it in, this is Kristen Van Nest, and her book is available on Amazon. Everybody can get that. And you know what helps when you buy a book? Helps when you do a review. So there you should do that. And you know what I always say? Buy 2 books and buddy reading. Just do that. Do that with a friend. Like, hey, there's this fantastic lady named Kristen Van Nest, and I want to read a book with you. If you send that book to your friend, they'd be like, yeah, I'll go on that adventure with you. So buy 2. That's how you do this.
Yes, please. Thank you. And if you do the
Yeah.
audiobook, I'm reading it. So if you find my voice annoying, don't get the audiobook, but
No, your voice is
I
not
love doing the
annoying.
audio.
Get that nonsense out of your head. Your voice is fine. You're
But
doing great.
speaking of like not knowing skills, I started doing voiceover when I started in LA and I didn't really know where that was going to go, but other actors
Yeah.
did it. And flash forward to now doing the audiobook. I had so much fun recording the audiobook. If you listen to it, I do lots of wacky accents at the end and less in the beginning
Right.
because I was more nervous. But because I had that voiceover skill and that performance side to me, I was able to do that more confidently than probably the
Yeah.
average writer because I had that experience. So that's where like sometimes you don't know where a skill is going to take you, but it takes you to where you want to go.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy. And also just the default to create, right? Like
Yeah.
I've written the book. Why wouldn't I read it? And not everybody needs to, but you have that option now. And you can literally do it in your own house. You can just like read this
Yeah.
thing. And if you were inclined, you could engineer it yourself too. You probably shouldn't. You probably pay somebody else to do that, but it's an amazing time where you can get out and perform your book. What is your favorite audiobook you think you've listened to?
Ooh, that is a great question. While I was working on this one, I listened to Wild by Cheryl Strayed. It's another memoir about her traveling the Pacific Northwest Trail, and it's really, really raw. Like she talks about being a drug addict and shooting up heroin and her mother's death. So mine's very funny, but I was so inspired by how honest she was that listening to hers really pushed me to be more honest and really made me think about how we can change as people. It's not read, but that one's not read by the author, but the whoever does the voiceover is amazing.
Yeah, I got it. I'm putting the link into the book right now for anybody interested in reading that. And some of these things in life, they're just they Volkswagen buses, like the old style ones, these are things of dreams, right? You see them like, oh, where are they going? You know, Pacific Crest Trail. Oh my gosh, who's doing that? Tell me all about it. Like these things inspire at least me. I have wonder and wanderlust. I always want to be filled with wonder, and I love to wander. So I have both
Yeah.
of these things, and I know that both of those things aren't really words, but you know what? Yes, they are, because you can like, oh man, I want to go out and see wonderful things. I want to be in awe. I want to collect joy because it's easy to collect misery. I've got a pick line attached to my arm right now. You know, like we can
My
do
God.
things, and like just a minor thing, but I mean, it's a major thing, but you push it down because there's plenty of misery within that, right? But also, you know, let's go see things. Let's go up this mountain. Let's go to the beach, or whatever it is, and try to enrich life. And again, this is why you do podcasts. This is why you write. All of these things.
Yeah, it's so true. I feel like there's a book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if you've read that. I'm blanking on that. By Julia Cameron. And she talks about what she calls artist dates, which are going on little adventures solely for the purpose of filling your creative well. So thinking about
Yeah.
like, you know, if we're only focused on the creative project, it can be draining because we're putting so much work out into the world. And sometimes it's good. So her suggestion is like go to a museum or read
Yeah.
something or paint, have an outlet or a way that you can see the creativity of others. And that helps. It may not be building the skill, but it really helps kind of fill the well with new
Mhm.
inspiration.
Yeah. That's great. And if you understand that the well is a well and it always has water in it, you start to relax about, you know, will you run out of great ideas? Like I always say, great ideas are common. Everybody's got those. It's what do you do next with that? Do you write it down? Do you act upon it? Do you push when the resistance comes and push through it? I mean, these are things that separate folks from like, I'm not sure if I want to do this to I'm the best in the world at it. It's just constant repetition and pushing and pushing and pushing and going, is this still a great idea? Does it deserve my attention? And having the courage to be like, that idea, done, out. Like most of the shows I thought of, I've never started or halfway started and didn't survive. This one has. And so there's like a discipline there that I found.
Yeah, someone was telling me, I don't know where they got it from, but they were saying write down your top 10 goals, like when, you know, at the beginning of the year when you're figuring out what you're going to do. And then they said, okay, now scratch out the bottom seven. Because sometimes if you act on too many things, you never accomplish anything. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sometimes like your priority number four is actually a distraction to priority number one, two, and three, which is a
Yeah.
really, I found an interesting way to look at it because I feel like you and I are like we're like, oh, the creative, I want to do all these things. And then it's like, hold on, what are
Yeah.
the main things I want to do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
let's focus on those.
Yeah. And as I've gotten older, the things that I'm capable of doing become much more complex and hard and expensive, you know. And so, like I'm trying to make several documentaries right now, and that is not a gentle process. It is deliberate. It's, you know, it's challenging, but I can't make all of the documentaries I want to make. And they're all excellent ideas, all of them. And so I've just got to be deliberate. Maybe I can co produce two at the same time. Maybe I can have a third that's kind of just boiling in the background that I can, you know, push forward. But yeah, painting on top of that? Nah. Nah, you know, I'd love to paint,
Yeah.
you know, but I just have no time for it, you know, and I definitely want to hear what you think about this as you try to figure these things out. And you're always like, okay, I figured this out, you know, I've got this much capacity. Okay, now I've got this much capacity. Oh, now I've got this much amplitude in my capacity, you know, and the you with you gets bigger. When your friends want to help you, they often just put more work on your plate. You know what you ought to do? You know what you ought to do? Hey, Christian, you know what you ought to do? And you're like, hey, you know what? I don't need things to do. Like, if you want to help me, here's how you can help me, and have advice or have like a suggestion on how they can help.
Yeah. I two things to that. I find that the people that I take advice from are the people who've done what I want to do.
Yeah,
When I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna move to China." And at the time my roommates were like, do you speak Chinese? No. Do you have a place to live? No. Do
yeah,
you have a job? No." And they were like, "Yeah, that's insane. That's gonna fail." And I was fine. I got a job at the largest wine importer within moving there within a month and a half. I was able to get a job. I lived on a friend's sofa for a couple days, or technically his girlfriend's, because he had visa issues. So I showed up in this beautiful Norwegian woman who I'd never met before. I was like, "Hey, can I live in your house?" And she's like, "I'm moving in 2 days." And I'm like, "All right, I'm going to find an apartment right away." But people sometimes project and they tell you, "Oh, you can't do that." And it's
Yeah.
not coming from a place of trying to discourage you. It's coming from a place of fear in their own lives. So, what I've found, if there's a specific thing that I want to do, in this case, it was moving to China. I told every single person I know, I'm going to move to Shanghai. Or I said, I'm going to move to Asia. I'm figuring out where. And they were like, "Oh, I know this person who's actually a journalist in Cambodia." Or like, "Oh, I know this person who works in banking in Hong Kong." And I would email them and just be like, "Hey, can I do an informational interview? Like, I'm looking to move to Asia." And through all of that, I really realized that it was possible and that Shanghai was the city that I wanted to move to. So when everyone was telling me, "Yeah, you need help. You can't do that. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
It was really about finding people who had done it and then asking them. And if they were like, "You know what? This is a terrible idea," then I probably wouldn't have done it. But I rather hear that from them than someone who's never left the country.
Yeah. Yep. It's and even if it's not fear, even if it's just the stability of their life and the things that they value, you value something different. And so you might hand me an essay that you write, and I'll look at it, and I'm going to leave your style and your thoughts alone, and I'm just going to like give you notes on the other parts of it, because you got to be you, and I'm not going to try to tell you how to be you. But if I feel like, hey, like one of the things I love to say, especially to younger people, is like, you sound like an authority here. Remember this little part that you said, and do more of that. Because when you sound like an
Mm.
authority on something, boy, it's authoritative, and people listen.
Yeah. If like people want expertise, they trust expertise. And so if you know what you're talking about, they're like, "Oh, tell me more about that."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing about moving to Asia, China, wherever it's going to be, they have jobs there. They have people that
Yeah.
speak English there, and they
Hmm.
have places to live. All
Yeah.
those things are widely available. They have plenty of them. You may not get the perfect one when you land, but that's not why you go.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. And when it comes to goal setting, for me, what I've found is most impactful is putting time on the calendar. So it's like if I want to write a book or if I want to do start a podcast, I'm going to put one. It's not, I am going to be the best podcaster in the world. That's a dream. To me, that's not a goal. The goal
Right.
is I am going to write 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday. Or I'm going to work on my podcast 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday. And like you said, then you build the skill, you're slowly getting there.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a more powerful goal than I'm going to be the best podcaster in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes you need those goals that are crazy, like I'm going to become the
Yeah.
this and that or whatever it's going to be. But yeah, like on day-to-day things, if you shoot for the moon all the time or the stars or anywhere else, you know, next thing you know, you didn't even do it. You didn't even build the gun to shoot yourself
Yeah.
anywhere. Like you're just like, oh yeah, forget about swimming. That's hard. Because
Yeah.
swimming's easy the first 3 days. It's that fourth day, that 24th day, and as you build up and you to build the capacity, you're just spending a lot of time just incrementally getting bigger and better, but you don't see or feel it. You just intuitively know that you're getting better at that thing.
Yeah. There's in the book Atomic Habit, they mention how, like you're saying, it's not as exciting getting like doing the 1 hour of writing might not feel super fulfilling on day 25, right? You're like, "Ugh,
Right.
I have to do this again. I don't want to do it again. I did it yesterday. I did it the day before." So what they suggest is that, and this is I took their tip and this is how I do it, is I have a little bowl that I put quarters in and a little plate. And every time I do my goal of writing I do 2 hours a day, I put the coin in the little bowl. And when I have enough, we live in LA is expensive. I go down
Yeah.
to Salt and Straw I take all my quarters and I buy myself an ice cream. And that ice cream tastes better than any ice cream that I did not earn
Yeah.
from working
Yeah.
all those hours. So they
Yeah.
suggest doing something like that so that you can feel some kind of fulfillment, because when you're in the nitty gritty, it doesn't feel, when you're on lap 25, you're like, my body hurts. You're not
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm swimming 70
Yeah.
laps. You're like, I'm in
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah. 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 And 70, like that's just to warm up. You're
Oh
like,
my
wait a second,
gosh.
what? Like, yeah, we're gonna go swim for 90 minutes and we're gonna do way more than 70 laps. Like, wait, hold on. What's but you build up to that, right? You build that capacity, you build that. And look, we'll just use swimming as another example or the continuous example here, but obviously it's physically rewarding, but also it's a meditation. And so it, there's certain ways you can swim, right? I'm not trying to be fast. I'm there for health. I'm there for well-being. And so I sometimes count laps, which is an exercise in and of itself because I don't use it. I use my brain for that, right? And you lose track because it's a meditation. And sometimes I'm like, I'm not getting out of this pool for 90 minutes. And I just go swim. I don't care how far I swim because it's irrelevant. What I care about is that meditation, is that mind, body, and soul improvement that I got. And you get out and you're like, wow, and I can't swim right now, but why would I ever not do this? And I try to put myself in that frame of mind and going, remember this, remember this. And it's so easy to forget how wonderful it feels once you finish that work. Swimming is one of those things that gives you immediate feedback as well as long-term benefit.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, getting that kind of like reminding yourself of that feeling.
Yeah.
'Cause yeah, it'll in the middle, you're like, "I hate this," but then by the end, you're like, "Oh, wow, I actually did that."
Yeah. 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 When you talk to your peers, given all the things you've done, all the things they're doing, when you're young, just so many people go in so many different directions, whether it's your high school peers or college peers or just friends you've had for a long time. What do they say to you about what you're doing in your life?
Um, I think they're proud of me for writing a book. Um, and I think those who have known me for a long time, they have always known that I've been the person who just does whatever I want. So
Right.
it's not like off brand. I moved to like Luxembourg, I moved to China. So like they're like, you're just going to do whatever you want. And so I think the people who really know me well aren't
Yeah.
really surprised by my behavior. It's just like part of me. Um, but I'd say they're definitely like, I mean, they're proud, they're good friends, they're proud, and they know that I worked really hard on the book. I'd say a weird thing about memoir is that it's very personal. So I did a live read at Book Soup over on the Sunset Strip the other day, and a friend was like, "Wow, I just realized I know so much more about your life than you know about my life," because she had finished reading my memoir. And so I'm very kind of, with my book having just come out, I'm very kind of curious how that plays out in my personal relationships. Because I don't know what it's going to be like. It's like having someone read your diary. The person that you might be your best friend where you are in your life right now didn't know you at other phases of your life. So it's kind of intimate, and I'm very curious what that experience is going to be like as more people learn about me when I was like an idiot in 20,
Yeah.
or like,
Yeah.
all the adventures I had.
Yeah. You don't. This is just Pete talking here, but I think I can say this to you. You don't stop being an idiot. You're just a 30-year-old idiot or you're a 40-year-old
That's
idiot.
true. Yes,
And
I
so
agree with that.
a friend of mine he's a good bit older than me. He's like, I just turned 60, and this was 10 years ago. And he's like, I just now kind of figured it out. And I'm like, oh man. So, I got a ways to go still. So I'm just letting you know, you're still an idiot. It's totally fine. You
Yes,
are your own kind of idiot. But
yes, exactly. No, it's so true. It's so true.
yeah, yeah. Why is it that you can't just stay in one place? Why can't you just have that TV show looking life in New York City? You're like Mary Tyler Moore, you're wearing great clothes to work and just living that dream. I mean, that's the dream New York life for a lot of people, what you were doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for me, I love the growth phase of things. So when I start a new job, when I start a new project, when I start, a new like book, I love the part of building something, and then
Mhm.
when I achieve it, I get bored. So, I know
Yeah,
most people
yeah,
aren't like that, but for me, it's like, oh, I wanted to live in New York City and have a fancy consulting job. And then I'm there and at first I'm like so excited about it. And then a year and I'm like, oh, I can kind of do some of this in my sleep. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And so I've just, maybe it's because I have ADHD. I don't know, but I'm just like one of those people who's always every 3 years kind of
Yeah.
mixing things up. But I personally couldn't live any other way. So
Yeah. Yeah.
how about you?
It's so just for everybody, I hurt my ankle in combat one time getting off a bus, nothing crazy, but just stupid thing, but really hurt it bad. And so about 15, 20 years later, it's like, hey, you got to rebuild me. So I had my ankle rebuilt in February, and that was going perfect until the second the infection got there. And now I'm another multi-week, adventure trying to get my ankle back to where I can get it back to where it needs to be. And during this time, I'm a guy who likes to be in my truck. I like to drive a place. I like to get an airplane. I like to fly to places. I like to go do things. I like to meet with people. I like to have fellowship with people. I'm the guy from my senior class from high school. I'm like the mayor of our class. I'm always getting people together, even if it's one-on-one. These are the things that I do. Now I'm flat on my back, waiting, can't do anything. And your brain can convince you. At least Pete's brain has tried to convince him. He's like, that's it. You're lazy. You're a piece of shit. You don't get anything done. And I'm like, nope, that's not true. I've done a lot of things. And I can just start to list all the amazing things I've done. It's like I've had this wild adventure of a life. And I'm like, it turns out I'm a completely different person than I was 20 years ago, completely different than 20 years before that. And so I'm going to apparently be a person that constantly evolves and is not going to sit still in a place. I couldn't imagine a company hiring me, like a corporation saying, Pete, you're going to be the director of branding. Because I would be like, hey, all right. And I'm a wild horse. I've gone outside of the wire in a war zone all the time. My job was a spy. And so you're looking at someone who is super independent. But the second I slow down, boy, I start to struggle with who I think I am.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I had a cold a week or two ago, and every time I'm sick, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I do the same. I like spiral. I'm like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? I'm just lying around. Is this really like, who I am now? And it's
Right,
like,
right.
no, and it's also hard because I'm getting the cold probably because I push myself too hard. But I
Yeah,
also that's where I'm happy when I'm constantly doing things like that is the building is the fun for me. But,
yeah,
we have to take those moments and relax. And those are kind of scary moments when we're like, wait, but who are we really? But I feel like
yeah.
personal growth sometimes involves that pausing and reflecting. And sometimes when we don't pause and reflect, it's because we're hiding from something. We don't want to
Oh boy.
actually open that onion and see what's inside
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it'll
By
make
the
us
way, this
cry.
is the link to Kristen's book down here, Where to Nest. You can get it on Amazon. And I always say buy two because it's good for you and it's good for your friends. Yeah, that whole thing of trying to convince yourself you're something you're not, and that default. And this is kind of why, like, I try to pack joy into my life. When was the last time I
Yeah.
cracked myself up, or cracked my loved ones up, or just went yes about something incredible? Because it is easy to remember that I've got an IV bag hooked up to my arm, and I'm trying not to be frustrated about it. But what a miracle medicine is, I cannot be in a hospital right now. I can fight this infection, and there's all these good things, but boy, that negative stuff tries to creep in, and I want to believe that stuff real bad, real bad.
Do you have any pets or no pets?
Yeah, we got a cat, and we have
Oh,
half of
yeah.
a dog.
Because
The dog kind of bounces back and forth. Yeah,
this is like
yeah.
when I'm like, what brings me 80% of my joy? It's this little fur ball right here.
Look at
And
that
we think
verbal.
that it's like, oh, what makes you happy? It's like, well, most days, I work from home, and like watching her just do her like dumb little things is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so it's
Yeah,
so funny how like sometimes we think joy can come from life purpose, joy can come from other things, but
yeah,
sometimes it's at least for me, it's like my cat who reminds me, "Hey, don't be so serious all the time," you know?
yeah.
Sometimes you have to bite your own tail. It doesn't make sense, but
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to do it.
My kitty loves a sun bath in the afternoons because
Oh.
our window faces to the west, and she's like, "Come on in!" Doesn't even stop to talk to anybody. Just goes straight up to her little catio and just curls up and just like, bakes, and she loves it.
Oh,
And it's so great to see her little routines and everything. And it's funny how at least my cat, I imagine most our cat's an indoor outdoor cat. She goes in and out as she pleases. And she has a clock. She knows what time of day it is, and if when we do daylight savings time and it changes, she's like, "No, I'm not doing that shit. I'm gonna stay on the original
yeah.
time I was on." So
I have a
it's
little, like,
amazing.
robot that feeds my cat because otherwise she eats too much, so her food's, like, automated, and if I
Yeah.
change it for daylight savings or anything, she's like, "Oh my gosh, where's the
Yeah.
food? It's
Yeah.
supposed to come right now." And it's a good reminder that, like, at our core, we're
Yeah.
creatures of habit sometimes, and that's why I really like traveling. Even
Mm,
though LA is my home base, I try
yeah.
and live 1 month of the year, outside LA.
Yeah.
And,
So good.
the reason for that is because it helps me kind of break patterns. Because when
Yep.
we live in the same place, we become the same routine, and not only that, we think the same way, we have the same beliefs. And so for me, having a break away from my home is very important to reset those patterns and be like,
Yeah.
"Well, do I really need to try raw milk? Because apparently that's a trend in LA, but it's banned in Florida. Do I need this?" And start thinking about those
Yeah.
things where you're like, wait a second, everyone's telling me how amazing it is, but like maybe I shouldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said a lot there. I was thinking the other day, like if I was showing my pattern of my day-to-day life here at my home and where I went, there'd be like 5 main paths I take for everything when I leave the house. But we live in Southern California. You can go 10 minutes in any direction and you'll find a Home Depot, you'll find a grocery store, you'll find everything you need. But I, for whatever reason, go this way. And
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like you could travel where we live because it's so dense and go to a whole new world. Like just like it is like for me, I live kind of by Santa Ana. I could go into Santa Ana and buy my things there, and be like, this is a completely different place. And so I love the part about the cultural thing. I'm really big on culture, and but I think what folks miss about culture is they're trying to not offend all the time. Oh my gosh, I don't want to offend anybody. But everybody knows we're talking big cultural changes. You go into China, you go into Luxembourg. They're like, oh yeah, you're an American. You're not supposed to know all of our customs. And so that curiosity of tell me your custom, what's your Christmas like? It's a great conversation, or Ramadan, or whatever holiday it is. And when you understand how they commune, so much of it's the same, but where it's different is fascinating. And then people from another place that you go to their place, they are desperate to show you the best thing about their place. And so you just
Mm,
have to say, what's the
yes.
best thing in this town? Like, what's the coolest, most interesting thing? And they're like, oh, let me show you. And then off you go on this adventure with this person or on your own adventure, whatever you want to do. But I love that about traveling and being able to, I call it miscomfort. It's not discomfort. You just don't know the comfort of this area, right? And I know miscomfort's not really a word, but Pete says that it is. So presto changeo it is. And so you'll adapt to that new comfort after a short amount of time. And then you can relate it back to your life, to other people, write about it. I mean, in another life, I'm probably a guy that travels around America and just reminds us how great this country is. It's not what I do professionally, but I love that practice of going somewhere and going, oh my gosh, this part of West Texas is incredible. Everybody should know about this.
Yeah, when I first moved to China, I was like feeling homesick and was just, didn't have a job yet, was just kind of sorting out what my life was. And I went to the local convenience store, and at a 7-Eleven when they have like the little hot dog, I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I should just get a hot dog, like, America. I'll just eat a hot
yeah,
dog." Buy it, bite into it, it tastes like candy. Like, it's a sweet pork, and I
yeah,
nothing wrong with that, but when you
yeah,
expect one thing and you get I spit it out, like, very dramatically and, like, threw it out because I was like, "This is not the comfort food."
yeah,
Like, even the thing that I think should taste like home, on the other side of the world doesn't. And it's like, at that moment, I was like, "What am I doing with my life?" But reflecting on it, I'm like, "Oh, that's funny because, it's those little moments that I
yeah,
literally, when you move abroad, you're seeking, but when you're in the thick of it, you're like, 'What am I doing?'" And then afterwards, you're like, "Okay,
yeah,
maybe it's funny that that happened and that was a cultural experience."
Yeah, yeah. And you as you grab those things too, this is part of like what I believe about culture is like you get better and faster at that adaptation, but you do have your things, right? And so like I have a very similar thing. And when I reach that point, I'll go to McDonald's and I'll get them. And I won't eat a McDonald's. Maybe if I'm traveling, I'll get a McMuffin in the morning or something like that. But like that's 30 times in the year. Like that's it, right? But when I go abroad, I know there will be a McDonald's. It will taste the same. And so I can eat that thing and be like, okay, yeah, I've got my little American itch. Now let me go find this, super local restaurant that I've been dying to try. And I don't know where that place is. I just know it exists. And part of the adventure. So here's the thing. This is a big secret for everybody. The pursuit of happiness is the thing. Like you get to
Yes.
happiness by chasing it, by chasing things, and they don't all get to be easy. Sometimes they're hard, sometimes they're horrible, sometimes they're bad decisions. But that exercise of the pursuit is really, I think, the key.
Yeah, I find it funny when we travel because part of me is like, you need to do every single local thing. Like, you're not allowed to have, a Diet Coke even if you want one or whatever. But it's like, you're traveling for joy.
Yeah,
Like, that's why we're traveling. So we shouldn't feel guilty. I mean, if we're only eating American food while in, yeah, I don't know, Japan or something, interesting. But like, if you're craving something, let yourself have it. This is about you
yeah,
living your best life.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so it's always funny. I don't know. I find like when I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't just go like you said, like go to McDonald's or go to Tokyo Taco Bell and whatever.
yeah,
But then you're there and you're like, well, this is what I want right now. I ate
yeah,
sushi all day. Maybe I want a taco.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I kind of have a hard rule on tacos, though. I really don't eat Mexican food outside of like the Southwest, and I include Texas in the Southwest here. And then otherwise, I'm like, nah, I'm just too much of an elitist at this point. I can't quite do
Okay,
it.
I agree with you because I grew up on the East Coast and then I
Yeah.
came here and I ate like street truck taco.
Hmm.
The $1.25 taco in LA. And I was like, this is the best taco I have ever
Yeah.
had. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
what is going on the East Coast? But I'm sorry, I agree like 100%. There's nowhere else. That's like a food where if I'm traveling in Asia or Europe, or if I'm not traveling in Latin America, like I will avoid Mexican food because it's just not going to be better than SoCal. Like it's just not.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's true. My cousins live in Montana, and I love those guys. They're awesome. They're like, "Hey, let's go get Mexican food." And I'm like, "Man, I was just in San Diego yesterday. I'm sorry, I can't do
No,
that.
no,
I
no.
just can't do it." And
A
I'll
good like
go, but
fried
I
fish
make the point of
taco. Yeah.
saying, "Yeah, I'm like this is you can't compare these two. It's
You're
some
like, I'm
things
gonna
are
have the
better."
nachos or like guacamole. I'm gonna have something very like we're not trying quesadillas. We're not doing a fish taco in
Yeah.
Montana. I'm sorry, it's not happening.
Oh, I had a grilled cheese in Vienna in the past year, and it was awful. Like, do you guys know how to make? Can I make you guys $1 million right now and show you how to make a grilled cheese, and then you just say we make an American grilled cheese that'll beat everybody else's ass. And I'm not talking a fancy one here. I'm just something that has butter on it, something
Yeah,
that cheese is roughly melted.
not just
This
like a
thing
dry
was
toast
awful.
and one single craft. Hard pass. No, we're doing the butter on both sides. We're grilling it a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Oh man. So this is a crazy story, and I want to hear you throw a crazy story back at me, and then we'll wrap up things here. But when I was in Afghanistan, my girl at the time, I had her send me like as much prepackaged taco night food as she could, and I made on an earthen stove powered by American parachuted in supplies, cardboard, right? All that cardboard that goes around our supplies. I made taco dinner for a bunch of Afghan cops and an Afghan governor. And, it was impossible to do and super hard, but it was as authentic Afghan cooking as you could get. There is no electricity in this valley. So everything is powered by whatever you can bring in this case, cardboard. And they didn't have the right kinds of pots and pans. So we just made do. But I made taco dinner in Afghanistan, if you can believe that.
Oh my gosh. So when I did the Fulbright, I had similar, I was abroad for Thanksgiving and So another American and I, we were living in Luxembourg and we lived in student housing. So everyone else was like European. And so she was an amazing Southern cook. So she was like, I'll cook and you tell Thanksgiving. So we cooked for
Yeah.
the whole building, and they tried all of our American food stuffing. I think she found a turkey somewhere and was able to work that out. And then I just told the story of like the pilgrims coming across and kind of like added my own funny commentary to it. But it's really interesting when you go abroad. Like I feel like comfort food is one of the most beautiful ways to remind yourself of home, of anything. Um, and my first Thanksgiving or Christmas in China, I got invited to a place by some Americans and I wanted to make pumpkin pie. And I went to 5 different stores, all the expat stores, none of them had it. And so I ended up just making like Betty Crocker brownies out of the box. It was the closest thing I could find. And it made me so happy just having those brownies, even the basic ones, because I just feel like home, when you miss home, like those foods really bring you back faster than
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a thing about food where when you share it, it's as primal as we get. Like, forget about primal diet in terms of like, caveman diet and stuff. But one of the things I realized was we often ate everybody else's food in these combat zones, these wives we never saw, we never got to thank, or making all this lamb for us and everything else. And I realized, like, I'm talking with a lot of VIPs, people that we want to talk to in Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever it's going to be. And if I brought them on camp and treated them like a big shot, because they are a big shot, oftentimes members of the government, right? So like, hey, bring this person on as if they are, a representative from the United States visiting, where we're like, oh my gosh, wipe down the garbage cans. Here comes Senator so and so, whatever. If we acted like that and took that person to the chow hall and I said, feast your eyes about this place. You have anything you want in a military dining facility, ice cream, everything. And I'm like, we got ice cream. Let's start there. And I would and their mind it would explode because I've treated this person with respect. No one searched them, and the commander would come by because I would set everything up, right? That's my job. And they'd be like, hey, who are you talking to, Pete? I'm like, oh, this is Bob. And he's like, Bob, pleasure to meet you. I'm the commander around here. If you need anything, let me know. And he'd walk away and let me do my work, right? But stuff your pockets full of muffins, eat this ice cream. What kind of food do you want? And everything is right there available for them. But we never thought of that. This is that perspective thing where I flipped it
Yeah.
around and realized if I can be a great host in their country, let them feel our air conditioning and all these things, they will be so off their center culturally, but protected, safe by me. I'm really going to establish a real bond with these folks because it shows that I care about them and I'm giving them something they can't get anywhere else in the country. No one else will ever bring these guys on. It took a lot of work to set all this stuff up because there's security that I have to say, hey, you're not going to inspect this person. You're just going to look at him. You're going to salute, treat him like a VIP. And once I got everybody on board, that hosting ability, man, I wish I would have thought of that 10 years earlier. It was amazing. It was an
Yeah.
amazing thing to do for people.
Yeah, it's so easy to forget the basics of just like treating each other, like other humans and connecting at that level. And
Yeah.
especially in war zones, it's kind of scary to think about that, but at the end of the day, like that is the thing that makes us all connect. And sometimes it's just getting to that core of like, hey, you're a human, I'm a human, let's chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is Kristen, and I love what you're doing. I love that you read your own book. I don't want to say I'm proud of you because you don't need that, but I think you're a badass for doing that. And I think it's incredible the adventures you're going on, the fact that you're bringing these adventures back to us because there's so many folks trying to separate us and trying to tell us that you can't do things and that the world's a horrible place. But it turns out the world's not a horrible place. Can horrible things happen? Sure. But if you go out and live a life the way you are, I just think it's such a great way to approach things. And it's not going to be comfortable, but I think you're okay with that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
What do you want to say in closing before we wrap it up? Anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, definitely check. Well, we met through Twitter, so if you guys want funny content, I post on social media, so definitely follow me at Kristen Van Nest and check out my book. I have a bunch of funny stories in there I told a little bit today. So if you like humor and you like travel, it is the book for you.
All right, stand by. I'll come back and say goodbye to you. Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you.